Welcome to day 3 of the virtual workshop series on #AltAC exploring career options beyond the Academy for Communication PhDs. Today's workshop focus on the theme Pracademics and Administrators. This virtual workshop series is being broadcast from the Tohono O'odham, Akimel, Utham, and Peeposh lands in Arizona. My name is Sarah J. Tracy. I am a professor at Arizona State University, and I thank the National Communication Association Advancing the Discipline Grant, the Transformation Project at ASU that I direct, and the Hugh Downs School of Human Communication, where I'm employed, for generously funding this workshop series. I also thank my wonderful program coordinator and co-investigator on the grant, Marco Denar. The purpose of this series is because, so why this, why now, why we want to cultivate opportunities outside of the academy. And we as a discipline in human communication, similar to many social science and humanities disciplines, are pretty good at professional development for professional academic jobs, tenure track jobs, lecturer jobs, professorial jobs. But an ongoing issue is the decrease in tenure track jobs. And this has been decreasing over, 15, 20 years. And then exacerbated by the last year with the hiring freezes due to COVID-19. We're so glad to have you here. So because of our large numbers, you can see if you look down at the participants, how many people are here today. You will be muted during the presentation. However, we definitely welcome your chat and nonverbal expression. All of that is welcome. So you can use the emojis, the icons to clap, to celebrate. This is an interactive meeting. We've actually had people ask and answer each other's questions in the chat and actually meet one another through the chat or post resources. So please do feel free to make use of that chat function. This meeting is going to be recorded and it will be posted publicly, most likely on the National Communication Association website sometime this summer. We are planning on recording and posting the speaker view, so if you don't want to be on the recording, simply keep your camera off and you will be staying muted. The schedule of the day is as follows. I'm going to go ahead and post that in our chat. And this is all Arizona time. And I am going to segue now to one of our wonderful Arizona State University doctoral students who is going to introduce Dr. Martin. And so I am going to turn it over to Brianna.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Tracy. Hi, everybody. My name is Brianna Avalos, and I have the pleasure today of introducing one of our presenters, the Director of Inclusive Excellence and Diversity Education at the University of Kentucky, Dr. Nicole L. Martin. Dr. Martin is an alum from Arizona State University with a master's in communication and received her doctorate at the University of Texas at Austin, concentrating on performance studies. Her work focuses on building campus-wide anti-discrimination educational initiatives rooted in both the theoretical and methodological frames of performance studies, critical race studies, Black feminist rhetoric, critical pedagogy, and critical ethnography. Prior to her current director position, Dr. Martin worked as the Director of Academic Affairs and lecturer for the Lewis Honors College and as a faculty instructional consultant in the University of Kentucky's Teaching and Learning Center to advance inclusive pedagogy in the classroom. Her teaching expertise focuses on performance studies, critical race studies, and Black feminism, and she is also passionate about arts and humanities education as well as just a broader community outreach, wellness, and social justice advocacy. As an independent consultant, Dr. Martin provides an opportunity for helping others learn how to facilitate cross-cultural dialogue and engagement in an effort to enhance equity and inclusion in their organization. I really do have the pleasure of introducing her today, and I'm so excited. Please, let's give a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Nicole Martin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brianna. That was such a lovely introduction. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are located. I am joining you this evening from Lexington, Kentucky. I sit on the native lands of the Osage, Cherokee, Shawnee, Adena, and Hopewell peoples. And I'm very happy to thank you, Marco, for all of your help in organizing, and Dr. Tracy for the invitation to share with you a little bit about my journey in academia beyond a tenure track position. So I did create a PowerPoint, so I'm going to jump into that and share my screen. Please feel free to, we'll have a Q&A portion at the end, but if there's something that just you have to ask in the moment, please don't hesitate. Okay. So title of my presentation tonight is I Made It Up, Reimagining What's Possible with the PhD in the Academy. Part of my title is taken from a poem by Lucille Clifton, Won't You Celebrate With Me? And the opening of this poem is, Won't you celebrate? What very few people know about me is that I didn't pursue my PhD with the intention of going on to become a tenure track professor. And not many people would have said that back when I was actually doing it, but there are more folks out there now. And so much of what I've done, so much of how I understand where I am today can be summarized by Lucille Clifton's poem. I am a Black girl from Kansas, raised by two parents who raised themselves and each other and raised me that education was the key. The key to what? I'm still figuring that out. So my goal today is to share with you my truth and my path in the hopes that it will provide some of you a semblance of a model for how you might carve your own path. So I have four key areas I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about what goes into making the decision, or what went into making the decision to pursue a career in the academy but not tenure track. I want to talk about very practical things that would be helpful for folks to know when prepping materials for your job applications. I want to talk about some of the strategies that I have found to be helpful and how I've navigated the past 5 years at the University of Kentucky. I'm currently in my third position at the University of Kentucky, and each step has kind of been a next step in my career development. So I want to talk to you about that. And then I want to talk a little bit about what I've been able to do in my current office of Inclusive Excellence and Diversity Education. So making a thread between all of that learning I did and what it looks like in everyday practice. So thinking about making the decision, despite knowing that I was not wanting to pursue a tenure track position, I still had those voices in my head that where I was wrestling with the same dilemma that many graduate students face, especially considering the graduate school climate 10 to 12 years ago, when very few people were having conversations around alt-ac. So here are some of the voices that I heard, and I wonder if any of them sound familiar to you. They accepted me because I'm still so grateful to Arizona State for accepting my application. Proud to be an alumna from that university. But I did have a lot of I don't think my parents did a non-traditional trajectory through their master's program, so I didn't have anyone to tell me what graduate school was supposed to look like. What did we even read? I have a very distinct memory with Habermas that I still think about. Building paralysis into the writing process. So that's during graduate school, that's when I learned that I was going to have to spend a whole day just sitting at the computer stuck before I could move on. feeling unengaged in seminar discussions. So much of what I wanted to talk about wasn't necessarily what my colleagues wanted to talk about. So that left me a little bit disengaged in some of my courses. Where I'm at, I didn't want a narrow path. Like, I think there's something that's really, I think there's something about the tenure track path. It's like, you do this, you do this, you do this. And for me, I'm a Sagittarius, so I like to explore. So I wanted possibility in that way. Show me the money. Student loan debt is real. Location. So tenure track position, you go where the job is, and city's really important to me. And part of the reason why city is important to me, because the culture is really important to me. I'm somebody who is used to being in predominantly white spaces. And if that's going to be the case at my institution, I want to make sure that I feel like I'm connected in culturally relevant ways to the city that I live in. So I chose to go to UT Austin in the Performance Public Practice program, and my dissertation advisor and forever mentor and wonderful human, Dr. Omio Shun, Joni L. Jones, asked me this question: how do you want to spend your days? And I think that's a really great orienting question when you're considering what you want to do. If you're not going to pursue a tenure track position, okay, then what is it that you do want to do? And I'm really lucky in PPP because public and practice were part of the ethos and the mission of the educational mission. They were open to having those conversations, and so many of those conversations for me revolved around this one question. And so I thought about the academy, staying in the academy, because it made a lot of sense. I'd had at least 8 years of deep knowledge of the university lingo and the way a university operates, and the familiarity of the university was really appealing to me. So I kind of, that's how I was able to narrow my focus to looking at different positions in the university. And some of the other things that I was thinking about: library access. I love to learn. It's part of the reason why I pursued a PhD. So having continued access to new scholarship and books. I mean, my goodness, I love a library. That was all really appealing to me. Benefits. That was actually one of the selling points that my first supervisor told me. She said, University of Kentucky matches your benefits at this percent, and after 3 years you're fully vested. And that's in thinking about other organizations where you have to be at a company for 5 or 10 years before you get to have all of the organization's retirement contributions to yourself. That was really appealing. Winter break. I do love summer break, but it's nice to know that there is a built-in period where the university shuts down. So that appealed to me as well. Faculty affiliate status. I still love being in the classroom. I love being around undergraduate students and graduate students. So being able to be affiliated with department that's associated with my academic background and have faculty and intellectual collaborations in that way and still access to the classroom was also appealing. Continuing education credits, again, I like to explore, so still having access to tuition waivers, and even at my current institution, they have scholarships for staff to apply to support class materials like books, which is really nice. And then nights and weekends. I like an end to my day, and I like an end to the work week. So when we think about answering this question, how do you want to spend your day? Knowing that I would have these very clear, although they don't always stay that way, very clear into the day and the week was very appealing to me. So I want to talk a little bit about how I went into the search. In prepping my application materials. So I found my first position at the University of Kentucky through Versal PhD. I'm not sure if they're still a functioning, like I don't know if the organization still exists, but that's where I went. I also looked at hnet.org and Chronicle of Higher Education, and I looked for positions related to program coordination or program management, director positions, assistant director positions, consultant positions, looked at research offices, looked at different institutes that are at universities, and then job titles related to instructional specialists. So those are all some key words that might be helpful for you in your search when you're looking for potential positions. And the position that I found was as a faculty instructional consultant with the Teaching and Learning Center here on UK's campus. And it was this part of the job call that made me go, I think I have just enough to be able to apply. And the job call said, a faculty instructional consultant will coach and advise faculty one-on-one, conduct workshops, and collaborate with a larger team in designing large-scale college and university-wide initiatives that reimagine the college classroom as a dynamic space. So once I saw coach, I said, that's my in, that's my hook. And part of the reason why I knew that as my hook is because, give me one second, I spent time as a speech and debate coach. So I was a speech and debate coach at Arizona State University and also with the University of Texas at Austin. So I talked a lot about how, so for me, I highlighted and amplified my work working with individuals and being able to tailor my approach to the person that I'm working with. I also, just given the fact that I was in a comm department and a theater department, and I did African and African diaspora studies. I had taught a wide range of courses ranging in size from 5 students to 300 students, seminar style to online. So I talked about that range because if you're going to be working with faculty and how they teach, faculty would be teaching a lot of different types of courses. So I talked about my ability to speak to a wide range of modalities of teaching and instructional approaches. I gave very specific example of the types of instructional activities I used in the classroom. I talked a lot about how performance influences the activities I create with students, and I did that as a way of highlighting how I might provide some value to the organization. The job call was actually looking for somebody who had experience in instructional technology. I had no idea what instructional technology was, but I did know about performance, and I did find it to be effective, and I talked about that. And I positioned and framed it as a value for the team. And then I also situated my interest in inclusive pedagogy. So I spent some time going through their website, and I saw that they had mentioned inclusion, and I said, well, that's what I do. And I saw that nobody in their office in their bios was speaking to that. So I said, well, if this is on your website and this is important to you, here's how I can contribute to that as well. So those were the things that I used to be able to translate my experience into something that would be of value to the Teaching and Learning Center. And I was hired. And so I typically give tips at the end, but I want to give them here because I think they're really important. Tip number 1, resume or CV, follow what the call says. Some folks, some institutions will want a resume, and that is different from a CV. So understand the difference between the two. And if you don't have a resume, it would be, I paid for somebody to take my CV and translate it into a resume. If not, there are plenty of people who use your resources, is what I'm trying to say, to make that happen if you're not able to do that financially. Tip number 2, and this is very important and not a lot of people know this, fill out the job application. So you have to submit your resume or CV, and you have to submit your cover letter. But then you also have the actual formal application. That's the really tedious one that wants to know every single job that you have. and answer all of the questions. Spend time on those questions. Don't fluff them, and fill out list every single job that you've had and every single paid job, because that will impact what type of salary offer they're able to give you. So that's very important. Tip number 3, keep the cover letter to 1 page. I had to go confirm this before I said it, and every single position I've had in staff, I've had 1-page cover letter. Which is very different than a tenure track position, which has very specific areas, and typically those cover letters are at least 2 pages. Other tips: be aware of how the salary range works. So, and this was a tough pill for me to swallow. They have a range. And typically they're going to put you right in the middle, and they're going to do that because they have to compare your salary to other people. They have to do equity comparison. So that's, again, why filling out that job application is important. And just be aware that you're probably not going to start your salary at that high end. It doesn't need to be a perfect fit. Apply anyway. I've done it in every single position. I've done in every single position. So just go for it. And then speak practically, not theoretically. I'm on a couple of search committees right now, and have been in the past. And what I find is the most difficult struggle for folks with PhDs is that they really research oriented and very theoretical, but aren't able to translate that into very practical, boots on the ground, everyday language. So make sure you get real practical in how you talk about what you do. Okay, so let's talk about what things have been like on the job, and how I've been able to transition from an instructional consultant to a director, and to 2 different director positions. Who do you know? Create strong networks. Every single position I've gotten it because I talked to somebody who said, you know what, this position is open. I think you'd be a great fit for it. So learn who's on campus, have lunch with every virtual lunch. I realize that we are in a different time now, but virtual lunch, networking events, get to know who you can know, because that's often how people move into different positions across campus, especially if it's a campus that you want to stay at. Sit on committees. It's less about, it's about the work, of course, but I found that so much of what's been helpful for me and how I've been able to navigate my job is knowing who's at what table. It's really, who do you know? Get to know the people. And I guess a subthread of that is learn the politics. Every institution has a particular way that power operates, and that's valuable information. Yes, okay, that's what I will end there. I think you understand. Set your boundaries. This one's important because I think. What I've noticed is that in higher ed, a lot of the senior leadership is made up of tenured professors who have shifted into administrative positions, and a lot of times they might be stepping into a supervisory role for the first time. And when I've learned about faculty, they work all the time. And like I said, I'm somebody who likes a night and a weekend. So those boundaries can be difficult to set. And I'm just saying, for your own personal well-being, setting those boundaries is really important. It's important in a tenure track position as well. And it's really critical in a staff position because the burnout happens quickly. And then this is a quote from a colleague of mine. We were talking about Alt-Ac at a different presentation last fall, and my colleague said, save your receipts. And what that means is that in higher ed, if you pursue a position with a PhD, there's still a a hierarchical difference between somebody who is tenure track and somebody who is staff. So a lot of the work becomes about self-advocacy and translating your skill and expertise in ways that demonstrate value. So when we save your receipts, it's like save those letters from students, save those, save lists of all of the things that you do. Like you have to quantify your work in a very particular way. And it'll be important to have when, as you're navigating the institutional politics. I like this quotation, Katina Rogers from SUNY Graduate Center says this about alt-ac. It's not so much a specific job, career, or field, but rather an approach, a way of seeing one's work through the lens of academic training and of incorporating scholarly methods into the way that work is done. And I think this is a very appropriate quotation for framing what I've done in my current position, which I'm starting to be a little bit more proud of every single day. So I'm happy to be able to share that with you. So here's a thread. Rhetoric, performance studies, Black studies, and actually Black feminisms, critical ethnography, critical race theory. Here's how it all is connected and what I've done in my Office of Inclusive Excellence, Diversity Education. So my office didn't come into existence until I stepped into my role as director. So I've had the very unique opportunity of literally building it from the ground up. I was the only full-time person in November of 2019. I hired 2 full-time people in 2020. I created the mission. I created the approach. This is my baby. And here's how I constructed it, drawing on my research. So the work out of my office, when I think about anti-discrimination education, it is always a critical approach. You heard that all over my bio. So it's asking questions, it's challenging assumptions, it's checking the validity of knowledge claims. It's invested in understanding the impact of power, which is really, needed when we're thinking about institutional equity. It's situated. So I think this is something that I've taken from Black studies. Context, history is important. The backgrounds that filter, the backgrounds through which we filter our interactions, awareness, analysis, and incorporation of the range of histories that we all come to a particular moment having. So in our work, out of my office, we're always historically, socially, culturally, and politically situated. We're taking that context into consideration when we think about the work that needs to be done. Privileges the body as a site of knowledge. That I get from performance studies, which is all about power in the body. How does power play out through bodies? How does power enacted onto bodies? And you can't do, and I'm going to speak specifically about anti-racism right now. You can't talk about race without talking about the body. So I bring that lens into this work, and I make it, I'm unapologetic about it. And then finally, I'm adaptive. So, you know, I was talking to my colleague yesterday. I said, we are involved in people work, and people require you to be a little bit improvisational, to adapt to the dynamics of the moment. And so that's something else that is all being brought into my office, which is Inclusive Excellence and Diversity Education. And it's organized around 3 pillars: language, history, and practice. So all of our workshops and all of our trainings are oriented around these 3 pillars. We'll hit on each three of these in every single session. So when it comes to language, we're really focused on creating a shared language to make sure that people not only understand, I'm using this again, racism as an example, racism as a cross burning, but also racism as a dentist touching my hair, which did actually happen. We talk about history. So much of what I've learned since being on UK's campus is that the history of race politics in the city informs what happens on that campus. So I feel, so it's our job to make sure that people are aware of that history. I was telling somebody yesterday, I said, yes, the Lexington Herald Leader didn't publish about the civil rights movement until 2000, I think it was 2004, 2008. And they issued an apology for having never covered the civil rights movement. And if people think that doesn't impact how people navigate race, they're missing something. And then finally, practice. I want the way that people respond to bias, to discrimination, to be automatic, to be embodied in an automatic way. So we create spaces where people can rehearse showing up in the world, showing up in the ways that they want to. Yeah, so that's what I've done in my office. And then I want to end on a quotation from Adrienne Marie Brown. She has this beautiful book called Emergent Strategy, which I think is great for anybody who's interested in facilitation or workshop leading. And she writes, quote, "We must imagine new worlds that transition ideologies into norms so that no one sees Black people as murderers or brown people as terrorists and aliens, but all of us as potential cultural and economic innovators." She goes on to say, "This is a time travel exercise for the heart. This is collaborative ideation. What are the ideas that will liberate all of us?" I want to end here because I don't think that I would know to situate this in what I do without having taken the path that I've taken. So it wasn't a planned path, but I think it has come together, and I've been able to recognize the threads in a way that puts me in a position to do liberation work and do it in community, and know that liberation in the ways that I want to see it, in the ways I think we all want to see it, doesn't happen with individuals, but it happens as a collective. So thank you. I think I did that in time, Dr. Tracy. I'd like to now open it up for question and answers.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. I have been watching the chat and seeing questions, and at some point you should take a look at the chat and see the kind of love and all of that you're getting from folks. And I'll kick us off with a few questions here, and I want to encourage folks to put their questions in the chat. I'll also be taking a look over there. So I'm going to start with a question about politics in universities. And so most graduate students are somewhat sheltered from knowing the larger political things that are quite common in universities. Just a small thing, and this would have been whether or not I was in a tenure track job, professorial job, lectureship, administrator, but I had never thought about the fact that by working for Arizona State University, I was now a state employee, and that the state legislature and the politics of the state would affect my job. That never entered my mind when I was a doctoral student. And so my question for you are, what are some of the political things that now that you're an administrator that are just sort of, maybe don't even strike you anymore, but might be surprising, or if you can bring yourself back to when you first left graduate school and then got into the administrative side, that were just, wow, I didn't know that this is how universities ran.
I can share something that's happened very recently because I think it impacts, it certainly impacts my work, but they're conducting open records requests from folks who are doing anti-racist, anti-discrimination work. So all of our emails that are tied to our university accounts, I think I knew, but I didn't know the degree to which those emails were not my own property. I think that's important to remember. So yeah, that's one thing that I didn't know. I think I'm still figuring out money and where monetary resources are being distributed. So I understand how I understood how certain colleges were better funded than other colleges, but I don't think I understood how those shifts. I see more now as an administrator how those shifts happen, and what non-academic units get funded more than others. So I think that's important to remember as well, especially when you're thinking about transitioning into an academic job that's non-tenure track. I would spend a little bit of time trying to do research, especially with the state school, because all of those state salaries are open record. You know what somebody who works at the state institution makes. Spend a little time looking at or asking questions about funding and budgets. I think that is something that is really, really important, especially if you're asked to do a really big project. Think about how that project is going to be funded. I think that's something I would pay attention to.
Really great. Thank you, Dr. Martin. Another question from Zheng Lu, and this person says, I think my biggest struggle about writing a cover letter for industrial jobs is to find the actual person to address and his or her title and their email address. So any recommendations about how to find this person to talk to?
Yeah, I've done it a number of different ways. Sometimes I will just say, "Dear hiring manager." I think that's what I did for my first position. I kind of rolled the dice on that when I said, I don't know if this is actually proper, but that's the best that I could go off of. If there's a contact in the job call, maybe reach out to see who is head of the search committee. And that might be a helpful way to find out who you should reach out to. Possibly go to the office and go to the office's website and maybe reach out, do an inquiry to the director or the head of that unit. Be prepared for that email to get lost or not responded to, just because it happens.
Right.
And so I see a question is, "Dear hiring manager," is that common? I don't know. I don't know. I've seen it in a number of different ways, but I can speak from experience on my end. When I'm looking at a resume, I skip right over that. I go to the content of when I look at a cover letter, I go right to the content.
Got it. Fantastic. Thank you. Another question, and this, if you just scroll up a little bit, is from Greta Underhill. It's just a couple questions up. Greta notes, really appreciate the insight on tenured folks who move to supervisory roles. That's such a helpful orientation for staff positions. Any suggestions for managing up and setting those boundaries while being mindful of the org politics?
I think what has been helpful for me is to remember that my job is to be helpful to my direct supervisor. So that is how I have managed up. When it comes to, I set the expectation, well, let me revise that. I set parameters early around when I respond to email and when I don't respond to email. I don't respond after 5, but I will respond first thing in the morning. I'll probably get to it early. So that's an expectation that folks can have from me. I think it's a challenge. I think it's really, really challenging. And I think that if you find that you spend more time managing up, then it might be a good idea to look for another. If the managing up becomes really draining, then maybe that isn't the position that you need to stay in.
Thank you. Another question, and this is from one of our doctoral students here at ASU, Bridget Liddell. And Bridget asked, could you speak to the social, political, and cultural separation between tenured faculty and folks labeled as staff? How important do you think your having a PhD is to negotiating these on-campus relationships? So this difference between faculty, people that are staff, people administrators. Another thing I would just that is connected that some folks might be interested in hearing from you on is how do administrators view tenured faculty members? Yeah.
I can happily speak on that. I'd say that my having a PhD has been critical to my navigating my positions at UK, and you're starting to see MA in job calls, MA required, PhD preferred, and if folks are using a rubric for assigning points to that, you get more points for having a PhD. I think especially at R1 institutions, because that's the only institution I've been a part of. It might work differently at a private university or at a R1 state university as opposed to a private university or a teaching university. I think that a lot of administrators, most administrators are student focused. So a lot of administrators are working and thinking about student interests, and there is this disconnect. There's a lot of battle between administrators who are like, but this is what's in best interest of students, and faculty, tenure track faculty, tenured faculty who have different, I guess, priorities, different focuses. So I'd say and then I'd also say that from a senior administration perspective, that the university is very invested in what the student needs are and what the faculty needs are, but the staff sort of get forgotten in how the institution is responding to crises or to important moments. So they'll think about the students, they'll think about the faculty, and then the staff are just expected to respond as needed. So staff needs, it's challenging being an advocate for yourself in that way as staff.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. Here is another question, and this comes from here. I don't have your name down. I apologize. From a very smart person who says, could you speak to the social, not that one. In your job search, Nicole, were you narrowing down your search with jobs that were only looking for a PhD degree? Actually, in some ways you just covered this. If not, do you feel like you were overqualified for your non-PhD jobs? You've kind of answered that. Do you have anything else to share there, or shall I move on?
No. All the positions I looked for had either PhD preferred or required. So I haven't applied for any positions that didn't require a PhD or want a PhD. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Here's a different space for us to think through, and it's this. This is just something I'm curious about. So, Dr. Martin, you clearly have a critical sensibility, and it seems like you've been able to bring that lens into your administrative work. Mm-hmm. Some scholars, though, and some students are wary of moving outside of traditional professorial work due to this uneasiness that they would have to leave their critical sensibility at the door, that then they need to be worried about profits and other stakeholders, and they have to kind of leave their justice orientation by the side. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that. Is that a warranted uneasiness? If it is warranted, what do we do with it? If we want to keep that critical sensibility and move into administrative work, any tips or suggestions?
Yeah, I don't think I understand where it's coming from. And I would say that it hasn't been, the problem comes from having to I don't have to put it aside so much as I have to frame it in a particular way. So I think, and I might have said this, I might not have said this, but I think I said this, yeah. So much of this work is about translation. So maybe they can't hear critical when it's said in these words. So I just have to find the right words that need to be said for the message to come across. So for me, it's not a matter of watering down the work or putting my critical brain aside. It's just like, okay, you're someone, I'm creating a persuasive argument here. What is the language I need to use in order for you to hear me? Because so much of what people's resistance to critical thought is because it feels like it's scary for them. It's unfamiliar. So you just have to. So what I've been doing is I've just been putting it in language and in a frame that feels more familiar, that invites people to consider a perspective rather than telling people what to think. So so I frame it as an invitation. Come join me at my table, see how much fun I'm having, and see what you do with it. Mm-hmm.
I think that's such a important distinction between this sort of invitational and speaking about these issues in a conversational way that non-scholars are going to understand. You know, most people do not want to be professed to and told about Foucault's Panopticon, although I would love to talk about that for a long time, right? But that doesn't fly right outside
right.
of the classroom or outside of our scholarly journals. So really trying to figure out how to frame that. And that's, I mean, as communication scholars, hopefully we're better at that reframing than some folks are. But it is, I think it's easy to just fall into this. I mean, we get taught to speak in this very theoretical way, and then feel like they're getting talked down to, and then we wonder why they're not listening to all this wisdom we've created over the years.
Yeah, and I'd say it's been a work in process for me. I'd say my first year and a half, I remember calling my mom and saying, nobody understands me. But I understand myself. So it was just, it took a while to find the language that I needed. And I can't, you know, if I'm ever not at the University of Kentucky, I'm pretty sure I'll have to find another language, just because where I go into, the space I go into might need a different frame and a different approach. So I'm open to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good. So we have two other questions that I'm asking you to do all the impossible to, and that's to answer in like 30 seconds each. One is, were you an instructor of record before you started your administrative job, and is it important to do that if you want to teach?
Yes and yes. Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. And then second, and this is probably something we could talk through for, you know, an hour at hand, but one of our participants direct messaged me and said, do you think that it would raise red flags for a tenured faculty member to move into an administrative position? How do you answer the question, why are you leaving a tenured position?
Oh goodness, I will try to do this in 30 seconds. I think it would raise a red flag unless the cover letter is unless the cover letter frame addresses it and then talks very specifically about work that has been done that would apply to the position, or work that could be done that would apply to the position. So I think addressing it, and then again being very practical about about how you're going to situate yourself in your work for the benefit of the organization or position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, one of the other things I would say in terms of that question, in our course that's associated with this virtual workshop series, we're reading this book here. And I'll hold it up. It's called Leaving Academia by Catherine. And they discuss that it's very important to come up with an elevator pitch about why you are leaving and to be able to frame it in positive terms. And that this practice, because when we're leaving, our tendency is to say, like, to trash what we're coming from, but that doesn't make us all that attractive about where we're going. And so it does take some practice to be like, I'm leaving, and because I want, you know, where am I headed to? And that thinking about how am I going to fit, as Dr. Martin just said, like, I have these skills, I want to be able to amplify them in different ways, and I feel like this new opportunity could do that.
Yes, and if I could add one last thing, and this goes for everyone, spend less time talking about your research in these positions. I think that when we're scanning applicants who are very research focused, that becomes a, hey, I don't really know if this person wants to be here, or this looks like somebody who may do this temporarily but is really actually looking for a tenured track position. So use the research only insofar as it helps you talk about the job.
Wonderful. All right, everyone, I do have a question for everyone that I'd like you to think about putting in the chat, and that is, what is one thing, I didn't do it to everyone there. Let me try it again. What is one thing that struck you from Dr. Martin's workshop? What did you learn? What will you take with you, or what is the impact? You are invited to share that. I think that Dr. Martin would find that interesting. And, you know, among other things, Dr. Martin, you were getting lots of love about how organized and professional your presentation was. The PowerPoints are beautiful. You know, there's these skills, I think, that aren't taught in graduate school, at least weren't taught to me, that obviously you have cultivated along the way. So thank you so much. I hope you appreciate all the love and acknowledgments in the chat. This has been an invaluable half hour, 45 minutes with you. At this point, everyone, we are going to take a short break. We will return on the hour with our second presenter. Marco, is there anything else that we need to say before we go to break?
No, just stay tuned for Dr. Rapumitra's awesome presentation here. We'll be back when will we be back, Sarah? 5 minutes?
Yes, we'll be back. We'll start on the hour. Yep. Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Thank you. Thank you all.